Hey, this is Pastor Kevin and Pastor Jeremiah with our online week 3 of our interactive Bible study. If you're joining us at home, we're so glad that you chose to join us. And as we work through the Gospel of Matthew, we're going to be in Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12.
About 2-3 years ago, my wife and I decided that we wanted to grow our family. And the route that we wanted to take in order to expand our family was through adoption. And we didn't just want to adopt any age. We were real excited for babies. And so we told the adoption agency and the foster care workers that we wanted to adopt babies. And they told us that babies are pretty much few and far between when it comes to adoption. But we said, this is what we want. We want babies. And so we got registered as an adoptive resource. And as we began this journey into growing our family, all of our anticipation revolved around getting a baby. And as we kept praying and asking and praying and asking, we waited day in and day out for that phone call to say, we have a baby for you. And that day happened when I was finishing up re-roofing my house. I took a large load of shingles, the very last load of shingles, to the landfill, and as I was finishing up, I got the phone call, and that phone call said, Jeremiah and Rena, we have a baby for you. And that changed our lives forever. And that anticipation came full circle, and when we got the call that we had a baby, it was now all joy.
In our scripture today, Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12, it's all about anticipation of a baby, but not just a normal baby, an extraordinary baby. Listen to this scripture. Matthew 2, verses 1 through 12 says this. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east came to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who was born King of the Jews? We saw his star when it rose and have now come to worship him." When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all of Jerusalem with him. When he called together all the people's chief priests and teachers of the law, he asked them where the Messiah was to be born. "In Bethlehem," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, O Bethlehem, in the land of Judea, and are by no means least among the rulers of Judea. For out of you will come a ruler who will shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod called the Magi secretly and found out for them the exact time the star had appeared. He sent them to Bethlehem and said, "Go and search carefully for the child. As soon as you find him, report to me, so that I may go and worship him." And after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and they saw the star that had risen ahead of them until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they were overjoyed. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they bowed down and worshipped him. They opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. After having been warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, they returned to their country by another route. This is awesome scripture of the birth of an awesome child. There's 2 things we want to point out to you in the scripture today.
The first thing that we want to point out is that of worship. When Jesus, the Messiah, shows up on the scene in the form of a baby, immediately what happened was it produced worship all over the world and all throughout heaven. As we read through the scripture, we look at verse number 2, and the Magi were coming through, and they said to King Herod, "Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and we've come to worship him." And go down to verse 11, and it says this, "And when they had come into the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother, and the Magi fell down and worshipped him." And so not only did Jesus provoke worship in the Magi, but we can see throughout Scripture in Psalms 19, it says, "All creation declares the glory of God." When we look in Luke chapter 2 at the story, what we call the Christmas story, we see that all of heaven worshiped Jesus when the angels appeared to the shepherds and to the men in the field, and all of heaven worshipped Jesus because of what great thing just happened. And then all the shepherds and everybody ran through the town saying, "This has happened. Jesus is here." And when Jesus showed up on the scene, it provoked worship throughout the entire earth and heaven alike. both creation and human being.
I think it was Max Lucado who said it best when he said, ever since the fall in the garden of Adam and Eve and when they sinned and disobeyed God, God has been on a reckless journey. The whole entire Old Testament is a reckless journey in order for God to get his family back. And so the second thing we want you to take away from the scripture is hope. Jesus is the coming of hope. He's the coming of the fulfillment of the prophecies. You see, in the Old Testament, there's so many prophecies about hope coming in human form, and that's Jesus. And so in essence, the birth of Jesus, in verse 10, it says this. It says, when they saw the star, they were overjoyed. Why were they overjoyed? Because it's the fulfillment of hope. It's the fulfillment of God continuing the journey to get his family back. And ultimately, 33 years after this birth, Jesus is going to go to the cross and fulfill it. And he's going to rise from the dead. But it starts here. The start of the fulfillment of hope, of God's promise to restore people to himself.
The two things that we want you to take away from this Bible study this week is one of worship. How has Jesus, the appearance of Jesus in your life, provoked worship in you? And the second is hope. How has the appearance of Jesus in your life produced a hope in you? As you go about your week, look for these things. Look for opportunities that Jesus has produced for you that provokes worship. Look for things that Jesus has brought to you that produces hope in your life, that reminds you of the salvation that he has provided for you, reminds you of the way that he brought you back into his family, reminds you of the way that he has saved you, not only from sin, but also from everything that this life produces that is harmful and hurtful. How has he saved you from these things, and how is that producing a hope in you?
So worship and hope, those are two incredible things. So we actually have some homework assignments for you. The first homework assignment is I want you to look for 3 areas in your life that you can stop and worship God. Maybe it's you want to worship God for his faithfulness. Maybe you want to worship God for his redemption that he brings you. Maybe you want to worship God for the forgiveness. You see, the whole creation was worshiping on the birth of the Messiah. What reasons do you have to worship? So I want you to write down 3 of those things and choose to worship because of those 3 things. And the second thing is next time that you get down, if you get down at all this next week, cling to the hope that God has restored his family back to himself. Special thanks to Pastor Julie for allowing us to use her office to record this week's Bible study. So get on it. That's your challenge and your homework assignment this week.